Okay, so I'm going to have these links. These are links that I will put down below the video wherever it ends up residing. But I'm going to take you through them because I think it's important to understand how to research and how to look for things and how to really pay attention to what, just because something is said in a study doesn't necessarily mean that that study has been well done, and you need to question things that go on in studies. And one of the best things I do when a new study comes out, I wait until authors that I really like do a review of that study, and then I pay attention to whether are they agreeing with the study or are they disagreeing. That's a really simple way you can actually take the stress out of and the confusion out of all the studies that come out in the papers, and that lead to people not taking action where they should be taking action. So here we are on that first link, why a calorie isn't always a calorie. And this is Tim Ferriss's blog, and I love this article because it's written by Dr. Michael Eads. And Dr. Michael Eads was one of the first people that really got me clear on a book called Protein Power about how much carbohydrate I should be eating. Like a number of books at that point said go low carbohydrate or change your variation, but no one actually pinned me down and said this many grams a day. And Dr. Michael Eads was the first one I really came across that information, and so I owe him a debt of gratitude for that. I love this article because he does talk about Ancel keys, and you'll hear a bit more about him shortly. But in 1944, Ancel Keys, he wrote, you've probably heard of K rations in the US. He was the one who created the K rations, and for the US military. But look at what he did. He did an experiment because they were looking at how to handle starvation in post-war Europe that they knew the war was coming to an end. And they put this study where they wanted to take conscientious objectives and give them obviously they're idealistic people. They want to give them a mission to what they can do something better rather than working in forestry like this guy was. They decided to, let's do an experiment in starvation. And this was the same guy, that's him there, and that's him a month short of the end of the experiment. He's already looking pretty skinny. Look at that guy's waist. I mean, what is it, like 15 inches or something? And look at what's happening to him. Basically, this young man suffered such psychological turmoil from the semi-starvation that he chopped off several fingers of his left hand a month or so after this picture was taken. And what they were on was a low-calorie diet, and one that people will often say you need to be on, made up of about 1,600 calories, and you'll see the percentage of it, but in terms of how much fat and how much carbohydrates it was. But that's what a lot of people are put on nowadays to actually, that's what you're supposed to do to lose weight. And here were these guys experiencing massive emotional trauma at the same time as they were starving all the time, they were cold, they were miserable, depressed, thinking about food all the time. That's not a good way to live life. And remember I talked about John Yudkin in his book Pure, White and Deadly? Well, he did an interesting study in the 1960s. That's what Michael Eads talks about. And you can actually click there to get the complete PDF of the study. But he basically put people on a similar diet. So in terms of, here it is, like this is the key semi-starvation diet, 1,570 calories, whereas the Yudkin low-carb diet was actually the same amount of calories. But instead of feeling like chopping off their fingers and actually doing that and feeling like they're starving all the time, these guys felt they were really well fed, not hungry at all. They ended up eating the same calories as the people who were starving, but look at the difference. The protein is lower, because often you think of a low carb diet as a high protein diet, but see, they're eating less protein. And the big difference is they're eating way less carbohydrates, 67 grams. That's an interesting figure. You'll pick that up later. But look at this. The fat had increased from 30 grams to 105 grams. And simply because of that difference, these people lost weight. This was like one of the early low-carb weight loss experiments, and this was in the 1960s. Pay attention, the 1960s. How come you haven't heard for this for the last 50 years? well, you'll have to argue with those people that thought they were doing the right thing for you. But these people ended up starving, cutting fingers off, being emotionally distraught, whereas the guys on Yudkin's low-carb diet feeling satisfied, losing weight happily, and feeling like they were eating really well. Isn't that interesting? And so I'd recommend you go back and read the whole article. If you've really got that idea, stuck in your brain that it's all about calories, here is the point here is sometimes calories are important, we'll talk about that later, but fundamentally a calorie is not necessarily a calorie. How it's burnt in a burner is different to how your body takes these things, because a body will treat a calorie from a carbohydrate different to a calorie from fat, and that's the main difference. We are a biological system, not a simple energy system, and that's the thing we all need to understand about calories.